This component of the audit toolkit introduces the concepts that have been used to design the audit methodology and the research team's approach to understanding peer-on-peer abuse. Central to the approach taken by the research team has been the recognition of a relationship between the environments in which young people spend their time and the individual decisions that they make when encountering instances of peer-on-peer abuse. We needed a theoretical framework and concepts that would help us explore this and translate those into practice to advance local responses. Concepts introduced by Pierre Bourdieu to explain the social world have proved very helpful. Bourdieu argued that there was a reflexive relationship between environments and individual behaviour, and that individuals embodied the rules of certain environments when they spent time in them and engaged with the rules at play in any given environment in order to navigate them and achieve status. When we apply this broad understanding of the world to peer-on-peer abuse, there are three concepts that we need to consider. Bourdieu talked about social field, habitus, and capital. Social fields were the set of social rules at play in any given environment. In cases of peer-on-peer abuse, these may be schools, public spaces such as parks, shopping centres, and other spaces where young people spend their time, peer groups, families, etc. Each of these spaces have their own set of social rules, and young people engage with those rules upon entering those spaces. A young person's habitus is their feel for those rules, and young people embody the rules of certain environments and display their understanding of those rules and feel for them in the way they behave and the actions they take within those social fields. And young people draw on what Bourdieu refers to as capital in order to navigate any given social field. There are four types of capital. Social capital, which are your networks around you. Economic capital, your financial resources. Cultural capital, your understanding of the cultural cues of any given social field. And symbolic capital, which is the combined nature of the other three forms of capital, which give you your rep in any given social field. Upon entering a social field, you draw upon your capital in order to achieve status. Let's apply these concepts to the notion of peer-on-peer abuse and young people's engagement with particular social fields. Consider a park. A young person who enters a park may need to draw upon a range of capital in order to achieve status amongst their peers and socialise in that space. If a young person lacks the cultural capital, the cultural cues, in order to form safe friendships within the park, they may experience social isolation. And these experiences of social isolation can create a vulnerability associated to peer-on-peer abuse. When intervening to prevent peer-on-peer abuse in this case, practitioners may attempt to provide a young person with an increased sense of cultural capital, expose them with ways of engaging with the cultural cues of the park in order to form friendships and avoid social isolation. If a young person enters a different park, one in which they're exposed to violence and abuse, for example, weapon carrying, robbery, they may need to draw upon social capital which enables them to safely navigate that park, such as their own violent or aggressive peer network. This form of social capital will help them stay safe when they're in the park. If this dynamic is identified, practitioners, instead of trying to increase the young person's social capital in order to navigate an unsafe park safely, may seek to change the rules at play within the park itself, and in this way prevent peer-on-peer abuse. You can see from these two examples that the relationship between capital, field and habitus is critical to understanding how peer-on-peer abuse occurs and what's required from our response. When we audit sites, we're looking for the ability of practice and policy to identify the relationship between habitus, capital and social field and disrupt the elements of that relationship which are most associated to experiences of peer-on-peer abuse. In one case, it might be addressing a lack of capital that a young person has in order for them to safely navigate a safe social field. In others, it may be addressing the negative rules at play within a social field in order for a young person to safely spend time there.